Okay, and let's move on a little bit, Rolake, to highlighting a little bit of what the conditions are like for people living in Niger. I mean, we read all kinds of data that there's a population of 14 million people living in chronic poverty on less than $1 a day. What have been the fruits of independence?
I mean, obviously, the fruits of independence. It's interesting that actually many countries in West Africa will be celebrating 50 years of independence this year. And actually, expectations of social and economic change lag far ahead in current realities. And Niger, by virtue of its geographical location, being a landlocked country, being quite low in terms of Human Development Index, indicators of the United Nations, but also being a resource-rich country by way of uranium, it's almost the typical African case of, commodity-rich country, but yet most of the population are in extreme poverty. And so the government really has been battling against the grain in terms of bringing economic development to the country. So it has all the sort of ingredients for potential instability if the democratic process is not entrenched or if it's not managed. And actually, most military coups that have taken place in Niger have tended to happen at the back of either a period of bad governance, high levels of corruption, or institutional paralysis. So that is a crucial factor, the socioeconomic situation, but that in itself is not the sole trigger for a move towards undemocratic government. Politics is a big issue, and the commitment of the elite to actually move in the country forward. In this case, that was lacking in a big way.
And if we could bring in the legacy of the former colonizer into this. As we speak, in fact, today it's the 125th anniversary of the Berlin Conference, where Africa was literally cut up among European powers. Now France is the power here, and there are reported rumors in France that deposed President Tandja planned to award a lucrative uranium deal to the Chinese, or possibly even Iran, according to some reports in France. So how much of a factor is France's interest in maintaining its existing uranium deal?
I think the best way to look at this is that the West will be looking at the postcode destination, if you might want to call it that, of the uranium or the resources and the deals that are being cut in Niger. You will recall that Niger was actually mentioned in documents during the Iraqi crisis. And then you would have the Iranians now doing some work with uranium enrichment. So the West will be worried. The role of France will actually be critical, but France actually has handcuffs on their legs because they have just revisited their role in Rwanda. Be it over a decade ago, where they were criticized when they intervened at the time of the genocide. And President Sarkozy, you realize that he is struggling with trying to revisit that. So their involvement in Niger, they are going to be very careful, because if they intervene and there is a worse scenario that is as a result of their involvement, that will just rekindle their involvement, their criticism when they invaded, when they participated in the Rwanda genocide.
Right. We're going to move on our discussion to perhaps discuss some more African-orientated solutions to this. About a week before the Niger coup, the African Union broadened its definition of, quote, an unconstitutional change of government to situations where leaders abuse or ignore the constitution to stay in power. So, of course, they condemned former President Tandja when he held his referendum to change the constitution last year, and they had no choice but to condemn this latest more conventional takeover of power. And with apparent popular support, perhaps the current coup situation in Niger does beg the question, when is a coup not a coup? Before we discuss the African Union's dilemma regarding how to establish democracy, let's have a quick refresher with this report from Kofi Asamoah.
Niger came under French rule in the late 1890s. By 1960, it gained independence, but political instability has limited its progress. The country is a leading producer of uranium, and in 2003 came under the spotlight when former US President George Bush claimed Iraq tried to acquire uranium from Niger for its nuclear program. In that same year, a UN nuclear watchdog concluded that documents relating to the accusations were forged and unfounded. The country has been unstable for some time because of coups, assassinations, and the rebellion by a small rebel group in the north. The rebel group, the Niger Movement for Justice, is demanding greater autonomy and a larger share of uranium revenue, which is currently being developed by French energy firm Areva. When deposed President Tandja lifted a ban on his term as president via a referendum last year, many suspected the referendum was bogus. Mr Tandja justified the term extension by arguing that the Nigerian people wanted him to stay in power to oversee multi-billion-dollar oil, mining and infrastructure deals. Mohamed Ibn Chambers, the outgoing president of the regional bloc ECOWAS, saw Mr Tandja as a threat to West African democracy, and perhaps this coup came as no surprise to him.
It is very encouraging to find that the authorities are sensitive to the need to have an opportunity for Nigerians of different tendencies to sit down and find a lasting and durable solution to the constitutional crisis.
Professor, if I could bring you in there, I don't know if you heard, but the outgoing leader of ECOWAS sounded almost optimistic in terms of what is to follow in Niger. And do you feel, after hearing that the military junta have agreed not to be allowed to run in future elections, do you feel that there is a possible reason to be optimistic about what they may do?
Well, I think the optimism is a little bit, if I would say, overly optimistic, in the sense that I think what we're seeing is just a symptom of larger fundamental challenges, regardless of the dispensation. And if those fundamental challenges are not addressed, we will see more of these kinds of push within these countries across the continent.
And in
so
fact,
I see the situation in Niger as a manifestation of larger fundamental problem facing democratization in the continent.
Right, but could you just end what you were just saying there with some suggestion on what you feel the AU and ECOWAS could do differently to be more helpful in the situation?
I think that the AU in particular, which has adopted the new charter on democracy, election and governance, which puts at par military coup d'etats with civilian coup d'etats, should really live up to what is commitment.
Right.
And do not give wink and a nod to civilian coup d'etats.